Intro now. So, welcome everyone to an expert interview. And this episode's guest is Steve Holden. He's a well-known name in the Python community. He's currently the CTO of a stress management startup in the UK. He has 20 years of experience with Python. He has taught many classes on Python, also on web programming. He's the author of Python web programming book and also the co-author of Python in a Nutshell. And also he is the author of the course of O'Reilly School of Technology's certificate series in Python. Unfortunately, O'Reilly School of Technology has closed down, so those courses are not available anymore. So, and also he has been the chairman of Python Software Foundation, and he has worked for small and large corporations. So I'm really honored to have you here on this interview. Steve, welcome.
Hi, Sukhinder.
Hi. So Steve, now would you like to tell me a little bit about your background, like when did you get started into programming and your motivation, and actually before that, I would like to ask, who is Steve Holden in your own words?
Who is Steve Holden? Some old teacher who enjoys programming.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, you ask about how I got into programming. I actually got into programming through my love of electronics, and I grew to love electronics because I got a third-year chemistry teacher who basically wouldn't talk about anything that wasn't on the syllabus. So classes and my chemistry was gone. And I took up electronics instead. So I left school very young at 15. I wasn't happy at school. And went to work as a production engineer in a local TV factory, which was a fabulous opportunity. I was basically able to go anywhere in the factory. Found out about all kinds of interesting and intricate processes. And after 18 months, I saw an advert in the local paper for a junior technician at the local university at the computer laboratory. So I thought, oh, what fun it would be to mend the computers when they went wrong and this kind of stuff. So I sent off an application, and they called me in for interview, and the director of the department informed me that junior technician was just a job grade, and that basically what they were looking for was a key punch operator. So really, I've no idea why he chose to call me in for interview, but he offered me a 6-month temporary job as a junior programmer operator. And that's how I got started in computing. So that was in March 1967 I started. So
Okay.
it's over 50 years now.
Okay. So maybe you mentioned it, but what were you programming in, or was it just bits, zeros and ones?
Oh no, it wasn't quite zero. It wasn't far off. I mean, the first computer I used had paper tape as its input.
Paper tape.
Teletype console to tell it what to do. But all the I/O was in paper tape. So I started programming in a language called Algol 60. And then I learned an assembly language, which was called Plan. That was for an ICL 1900 series machines. But I mean, this is me drooling into my beard. It won't mean anything to me. At all, so
yeah. No, I know assembly. It's
profitably. Well, yeah, but this was the assembly language of that particular computer, and they stopped making them in, I don't know what, 1988 or something like that.
Right. I remember my assembly first experience was with the Commodore 64.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Basic and Commodore.
There, did you have an assembler, or did you just put it in binaries and poke it in with base?
I remember messing with the address locations of the programs, and it was basically a bunch of us guys doing this stuff, but I was not the expert of that. I just remember like it was like like different codes that I actually did not understand at all. But I was doing like the Commodore 64 community. Then it was lots of small groups who one guy did the graphics, one did the coding, and one did
Right.
the music stuff. I was doing the music stuff.
A lot of people learned on those machines.
Exactly. So
They,
that was, yeah.
they were good fun.
So when and how did you get to know Python?
Okay, I got to know Python when I moved to the States, strangely enough, in 1995 by a strange piece of synchronicity,
Uh-huh.
which has nothing to do with me learning Python at all, but I discovered when I was doing some research for the history of PyCon for a talk I gave,
Uh-huh.
and I realized that Guido van Rossum and I both moved from Europe to within 15 miles of each other
Mm-hmm.
within a period of about 6 months without ever having known each other or known of each other. That just seemed a little bit weird. But I'd been interested in object-oriented systems since I did finally go to university at the age of 23, and the object-oriented work being done by Alan Kay's group at Palo Alto Research Center for Xerox came to my attention.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd been interested in object-oriented programming for a long time, but hadn't really found a language that suited me. So I found uh, uh, this book, Learning Python,
Mm-hmm.
in a bookstop, and took it home and devoured it in 3 days and realized that this was actually an amazing language
Mm-hmm.
for expressing object-oriented
Mm-hmm.
object-oriented expressions of programs
Mm-hmm.
in a way that the average person wouldn't find impossible to understand. I mean, I'm not saying the average person would find any programming easy to understand.
Yeah.
The mode of expression is quite natural,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a very readable language, I suppose.
Yeah. So I guess that's also that what you like about Python is the readability. Is there any other like traits from Python that you like?
Its readability and also its directness. Obviously, any object-oriented language is supposed to allow you to create your own object definitions and then
Mm-hmm.
create instances of those objects. But Python's it's staying well. I don't know. The recent work on asynchronous IOs has complicated the language somewhat conceptually, but I think it's a fairly direct, it's a fairly easy to understand language that makes it easy to express your ideas as well once you understand the principles of the language.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you met Guido. Are you like how is he in person? I have never met him, but like you have met him like uh and yeah, what would you say about Guido?
He's a Dutch, he's a Dutch geezer who designs programming
Yeah,
languages.
yeah.
Basically, I mean, the nice thing about Guido is he doesn't have any airs or pretensions, or there's no assumption that he's anything special because he happens to be the designer of Python. He's just interested in work, doing it as getting it done properly in the best way that he can. So he's quite approachable. I mean, obviously, he's so many people want to talk to him and get in contact with him that
Exactly.
he just can't possibly engage with everyone. But he does his best, and he's spent a lot of time talking to would-be Python users and people like that.
Yeah. Great.
He's very very natural guy. I was lucky enough when I lived in the States to entertain Guido and his wife Kim and their son for a week.
Oh, wow, nice. So I hope he isn't like a dictator like it says on Wikipedia. He's like dictator for life or something for Python language or something. I mean, I think that's a joke the community has on that.
I don't know. Did I hear about that? What is this?
No, it's like he's the undisputed dictator of the Python language.
Well, not undisputed. Right, it's BDFL.
BDF. Oh, that's what.
Benevolent dictator for life.
Oh, right. So.
But that's something that that's not really taken seriously.
No, 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 I know
It
it's
just
such.
refers to well, there is a history behind it. I mean, when Python was young,
Mm-hmm.
some disputes would go grind on and on and on. So in the end, they decided, well, look, if Guido says we have to shut up, we have to shut up. So he has the power to, to a large extent, ultimate say in dictating the direction of the language and
Exactly.
also how the community behaved to a certain extent.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, I mean the dictatorship has never been absolute or life-threatening to me.
Great. So, did you know the language ABC that was that Python is based on or got the inspiration from, according to Wikipedia?
Not only do I not know ABC, the only person I've ever met who's used it is Guido van Rossum.
Okay.
So I'm afraid I can't really tell you too much about that.
Not a problem. So, so, Steve, if somebody wanted to learn programming, let's say they just want to learn programming, but they don't know like
Sure.
what direction they want to go in. They just want to learn programming.
Yeah.
I chose Python. Like, would you recommend Python as the first language?
I think that depends to an extent on age
Mm,
and on what facilities are available.
mm,
If, for example, if if you have an iPad or something like that,
mm-hmm,
then it's actually rather difficult to program Python in that. But you can program in a language like Scratch, which is a visual language.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And the advantage of such visual languages, block structured languages, well, block based languages, I suppose we'd call them, is that being visual, kids can learn to put components together, treating them like bricks.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so they can get used to the basic structures of there are only three ideas in programming: repetition, decision, and linear sequence of
Mm.
operations.
Repetition.
And that kind of stuff is it's actually visually observable
Mm.
in blocks languages like Scratch.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that now people have realized that those languages can be then taken and those programs can be rendered
Mm-hmm.
other languages. So I can't remember the name of the environment, but there is an environment where you can program codes, you can code programs in a block structure, a block language,
Mm-hmm.
basically, and then it will translate to Python. So if you understand the concepts from the block language,
Yeah.
you very easily see the translated Python and make sense of it once you're ready to start dealing with programming as less of a visual concept and more
Exactly.
basic ideas. You can do them mentally, and then it's more efficient and easier to work in writing
Writing on, yeah.
rather than by pushing blocks.
Yeah. I think that's a very good suggestion to the viewers. Like, start with something that is visually understandable. I also remember my teacher in VBA for Microsoft Office application. He told me like before you ever write a program or logic, just draw it out. So in that way, what you mentioned about like working with blocks, it makes sense because you get the visual structures in your head first, and then you write the logic. Then you get to practice on the visual stuff first, and then you get to write stuff later because that then everything you can visualize it easier in your head. So I think that's a very, very good advice. Absolutely. So
Yeah, I think for particularly for younger children
mhm.
who might be interested in making things happen that way, then it's a way of engaging without making it intimidating or possibly boring. I mean, reading isn't
Exactly,
very interesting for some kids.
exactly,
Most
exactly,
children, I think, find it easier to engage with something that has sort of parallels in the vague parallels in the physical universe.
exactly. That's why I think iPads, iPhones are popular because it's very easily movable, and it's to for some kids they pick it up like that. It's this logic of how to shut a program down and how to start a program. So yes. So
I'm always interested to see how easily children play with iPads and similar toys. It's amazing how quickly they learn how to open the applications they like to play with and to interact with them.
Exactly, exactly.
It could be slightly sinister, in fact. You could see it if you wanted as the toys programming to behave in.
Yeah. So again, since we are on the topic, like how early should one start to program? Like, the reason I'm asking this is I sometimes find it to be difficult to get a job in the industry because I'm now 45 and I started to learn programming at the age of 37. With
Oh, yeah.
I started with VBA, but like if you want typical what kids these days ask me is like how to get into the big startups in Silicon Valley and do lots of money, and if they want to that kind of career, when should they start programming, and what should they be aware of when thinking about money first and then interest secondary in programming?
Well, I would be quite suspicious of anyone's. If somebody wants to spend 10 years training the kind of programmer that works in Silicon Valley, I would suggest nowadays there may be more sensible investments of their time.
Mm-hmm.
But this could just reflect my own ignorance of the Silicon Valley environment. I used to live close enough to the West Coast that I visited it
Uh-huh.
regularly, and it's a beautiful place. But there's no doubt it's much more congested than it was when I first went into Palo Alto in 1981.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure. Okay, you asked when should people start programming?
Mm-hmm.
I would say start programming when you have a sufficient with the programming skills that you learn.
Mm-hmm. Yes, okay.
So, if you have an interest in accounting, then write a system to keep your checkbooks and your credit cards balanced. And I know there are tools on the internet already that will do this stuff for you, but that you can use those as a benchmark. And well, why is there needing to operate time?
Mm.
How much can I do
Yeah.
with how little programming effort? That
Yeah.
kind of stuff.
Right.
But the point is, if you just if you start off and your ambition is to learn programming,
Mm-hmm.
it's a bit like starting off and your ambition is to, I don't know, to get to the other side of the road. It's like, well, okay, why do you want to get to the other side of the road? What's over there? So desirable. Now, if it's money, you're lost.
Exactly. Because
you can have no guarantee starting that you're going to be good enough to earn huge amounts. I mean, I've never really earned huge amounts of money for what I've done. I wouldn't in any way amazingly over my life, but I'm by no means what might be referred to as a rock star programmer.
Right, exactly.
Never really been the mainstay of a large international project or anything like that. Now, so really, if you're asking me, well, how and why do I get involved in those? I don't really have the right experience to help. I've never engaged with corporate life in that way. I did work for Sun Microsystems for about 3 years in the 1980s, just as it was going public, and that more or less decided me that I was quite happy to work with corporations, but I was pretty sure I didn't really want to work in them.
Oh, okay. I understand. So now I'm a little bit curious again, like what's about this corporate environment that you don't like? If I may get a little bit personal here, because
well, okay, I suppose at the broadest level, being of a socialistic tendency, at the broadest, I'm vaguely uncomfortable with any economic system that insists that competition is the best way. And I mean, in the open source world, we're now seeing, companies who compete in the same market. They're quite happy to collaborate on producing open source systems or helping to produce open source systems which benefit everybody, them included. So I suppose the corporate world is the ultimate expression of the capitalistic ethos, if you like.
Yes.
And yet we see that even corporations find it necessary to collaborate at fairly basic levels.
Exactly.
And it seems to me that it's impossible to have a system of competition, ruthless competition, where basically the goal is to eat everybody else's
Yeah.
come out of business so that you have control of your whole market. That just I don't see how that can possibly be economically efficient, I suppose.
Exactly.
So it offends my sense of intellectual propriety.
No, I totally agree with that because like getting bigger and bigger and cutting. I agree to that because like getting bigger and bigger and starting to cut costs at the same time, like workforce or production has to get cheaper, and the profits has to be like increased every year. I mean, at the end, corporation has to ask like, who are they producing for if there's no one buying it? If they are like people are not getting paid enough for their work, who?
I mean, ultimately, of course, you do have to ask yourself questions like, well, when all the financial returns go along the routes that they do,
Yeah.
what's actually happening is that people's labor is being devalued, if you like. But the thing I find difficult to take, if you like, is the sort of total absence of human purpose in the ruthless pursuit of capitalism. I'm not saying there aren't, many, doubtless the vast majority of people who work in corporations, they're just there because they need. I mean, when I worked in my TV factory, there were 900 people working there, and probably at least 800 of them have a serious interest in how televisions got made. They needed to pay bills,
Yeah.
Corporations, but as a form of organization, it seems to me it loses the chance for things to emerge organically.
Exactly.
Communities, and I've always been interested in trying to, the communities that go along with technical skills, like amateur radio and programming.
Exactly. So where does Steve Holden stand when it comes to the question? Is tech going to kill us, or is it going to save us?
Well, if we have to rely on technology, I would think back to the guy who was sitting on the first fly-by-wire airliner, and they made an announcement, that this aircraft was going to fly under electronic control of software for the first time. If passengers wished to depart, they could.
Okay.
He's just sitting there reading the newspaper, and so somebody says to him, "Well, aren't you going to get up?" He said, "No, I was part of the software team. This aircraft isn't going anywhere."
Okay.
I mean, technology is the development and exploitation of technology is a human behavior. And it's one of our characters. So, it's the technology isn't neutral.
No.
Except, the technology is relatively neutral.
Yeah.
It's the way it's applied that.
Exactly.
And I think if there's any sort of claim that anything you can do should be permitted, then we're in a totally lawless world.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I have given the thought, and whenever my friends like ask me this kind of question, I always tell them like at the time when the humanity was when farming was the agriculture was the main source of income for most. Then the industrial period came, and that was like a huge shift, and it was like it was a danger for a lot of humans, but again we adapted. And I think we are in somewhere in the same cycle here, that we have to find a new way to like survive, find out the financial structures, how they are going to work in the future. And I think if technology applied properly, it will be beneficiary for us, but again, there are like things on the both sides. It can be used for good, it can be used for evil.
I suppose the way I'd respond to that is that I would say, excuse me,
Yeah, sure.
I'll argue that technology can be used for good. And I mean, I've tried, insofar as my own abilities let me, to only engage with the things which were at least relatively harmless, hopefully positively good. But ultimately, I suppose my pessimism is about human nature and the way that humans will tend to try and exploit
Exactly
any advantage they have, because they live in a system where the exploitation of advantage is actually the social way of being.
Yeah. I really, yeah. I love this, like getting into philosophical side, because it is important for everyone to think about who want to get into programming. Like, where is this path taking them, and what part of the development, the social development, they want to be part of. So that's why these questions are very, very important. So great stuff. So then, okay, let's say Steve Holden is the recruiter for at a new startup or a company, and what describes a great candidate?
Hiring.
Yeah, if you would hire someone, like what's the perfect blueprint for a junior level Python programmer? What would you look for someone who to give somebody a chance get their foot into the door?
Okay, at the moment, I'm putting a team together. We're not yet at the stage where we'll be able to take juniors on. But one of the places where I'm putting a lot of effort now is to try to get things clearly documented, so that when we do start to employ junior programmers, we can make them immediately productive by giving them make commands. So, we don't want to have to spend a week setting up a development environment in order to be able to become productive. But from a junior programmer, I mean, let's say an entry-level programmer who's maybe founded an open source project, and they've got a year's record of contributing to that open source project. Then, were I to consider them as a junior employee, I'd look for someone who was curious both about the environment that they were going to work in and the tools that they were going to use. Someone who knew enough to hold a sensible conversation and programming, not necessarily a particularly high-blown complex one, but was able to talk intelligently about concepts involved in programming. And I would want them to be engaging in some way on a human level. There should be something about them that makes me think, well, when they join the team, they're not just going to sit in their little cubicle. They're going to take a broad interest in what's going on around them. They're going to be aware of influences that don't necessarily. So, it's like basically what people would traditionally, I suppose, soft skills.
Exactly, exactly.
Now, those soft skills, I think it's fair to say that historically the technology industries have benefited by employing people who maybe weren't quite as rounded out in the soft skills area as they should have been or could have been, and that's led to a certain bias in some dimensions. I mean, the one that's most visibly exposed at the moment is the gender dimension, but there are others
Okay.
as well. I mean, let's have diversity policy just to get an idea of how many different dimensions there are. So I think there's been a sort of one-dimensional thinking, which now the industry is finally realizing, actually, as ultimately is going to work to its disadvantage. So it needs to be corrected.
Right.
But yes, ultimately, an interest in what's going on, a willingness to contribute, a willingness to learn new techniques and tools. Those are the primary aspects of what's in there. And I mean, I wouldn't suggest it's going to be easy to get a job just on the basis of contribution to an open source project. But open source projects are a way that you can engage your skills in a way that, if you choose the right project and work with a relatively uncritical team, then you can learn along. And that's why I say, if your interest is in using programming to do something, then you'll be motivated to actually get things done. And it won't matter quite so much if, it takes you longer than you anticipated to get the job you're looking for.
Okay. So, let's say you have a candidate that you want to explore further. You find this GitHub repository. What would you do before hiring someone? Would you just look at their code, or would you also see how they have interacted with others on commits and replying to bugs issues and stuff like that?
I'd take a look at the reviews on issues as well as the code. Yes, I mean, sometimes, of course, people have just written something as an open source project and they're the only contributor, and that makes it a little bit, you can't really assess their interactions with people in that way. And then you're on, I don't know, the social media channels. I mean, if somebody was active on the Python list, for example, that's how I got started. I subscribed to Python list at python.org, python-list at python.org. Asking questions and then started answering questions and from there, really. But another thing is become a member of some sort of a community. There are local user groups all over the place now. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say you're going to be able to drop on one any night of the week, but there is now enough density of local user groups that in many places, you could go to a meeting once a month, talk to people here, talk about a talk or two about Python. So, for example, because one of my current interests is data science, I'm actually on the organizing committee of the PyData London.
Oh, wow!
Good way of getting to know people, finding out more about the environment, and the more familiar you are with it, then the more comfortable you'll be, answering questions when you go to a job interview.
Exactly. No, I'm happy that you mentioned data science and data analysis, because that's also my focus on this YouTube channel and my courses that I've made. It's geared toward data science and data analysis. So, and also, yes, since we are on that question or that topic right now, so what learning path can beginners start to take if they want to focus on data analysis career or data science career, for example? What's your advice?
Well, okay, I'm coming to data science relatively late in life. I had a university education in computational science, which gave me a background in analytical and applied mathematics and statistics. So I would say if you want to understand data science, then the first thing is you really need to understand science. And there are a lot of people who they profess to be working in data science, but there's not much science behind what they're doing. They're working
Exactly.
with data,
Yeah.
but the stuff they're doing isn't necessarily particularly scientific. But I mean that's a minority of the market. I mean, there are companies like Anaconda, they're called now. They used to be Continuum
Continue.
Analytics.
Yeah.
They're doing some amazing work producing analytical systems of various sorts and the tools to build them as well.
Yeah.
So there's a huge amount of work going on in data science, but that means, of course, it's a very broad subject to tackle on its own. So again, I would say that once you've got mastery of Python, find a problem that interests you, research the appropriate tools to use on it, and engage with the communities that are trying to do the same things as you are, and learn together.
Yeah, exactly. And then again, like, this is a question I get a lot, like, there are asking good questions, how to ask good questions, because sometimes beginners can be intimidated by the answers by the experts, because experts are good at what they do, and they encourage people to do their own research before asking questions online, and like very short questions without any like background, it seems to irritate a lot of experts. Could you elaborate on that, please? Why is it that, and what they should be? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, of course, there are a number of things, but to start off with, I suppose the first thing that we should say is, unless money's exchanging hands, nobody is actually obliged to help anybody.
Exactly.
So the first thing to remember when you're asking questions is that you are asking them of people who, if they provide the answers, are doing so, I wouldn't say purely out of the goodness of their heart necessarily, but maybe they're doing it for points on Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
But they know nobody's obliged. It's not like it's their living. They're not paid to do it or anything like that. So don't approach with any kind of attitude that I'm entitled to be helped here.
Exactly.
Like, remember that you are the supplicant, if you like. Hello, here I am in my ignorance. I have this problem, and I'd like you to help me. The other thing is, always try to give the right context.
Very important. Very important.
Why can't And Stack Overflow. So if your users go to a search engine and type in how to ask a good question on Stack Overflow, they'll get some very good advice on how to ask good questions. Another one is minimum verifiable example of I can't remember the full phrase, but basically don't just drop 150 lines of code into a Stack Overflow question and send it forward the program.
Exactly.
Chisel away stuff that doesn't really matter until you found the bit that you actually don't understand why it's working the way it's working. And I mean, if you undertake that basic work, and the more you undertake that kind of work, then the more often you'll end up solving your own problems.
Exactly.
You'll simplify things enough to realize, I shouldn't have pulled that library down with a third, whatever it was. You've made some dumb mistake. One of the interesting things about having been a programmer for so long is that I'm really good at messing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the story of that is, I'm so used to it, I don't expect not to. It's like, oh yeah, I messed up again. Oh yeah, I messed up again.
Mm.
So yeah, sure, accept we all have limitations. Maybe there are people. I met someone on the internet once who claimed he'd written, what was it, something improbable like 1,800 lines of code in one day.
Wow.
And he claimed it had no bugs, and I
That's a good one. No, it's good advices there. Like give the context and at least be humble when you're asking, because they are at least taking their time to answer your question, going through your code, and trying to like put themselves and trying to understand your code. So very, very important. Good tips. Yeah. So
another thing is that if you have asked a question and get an answer,
yeah,
you can also maximize the benefit of future approaches by saying thank you.
exactly. Be grateful. Absolutely, because experts need appreciation as well, even if they don't need it. So, so okay, so let's imagine we have a beginner programmer who has done the initial tutorials and now want the next step. So Steve Holden, what would Steve Holden say? Do this for the next, is like going to a certain website or reading a book. Would that help?
What, reading?
Yeah, reading books.
Yeah, reading always helps. But well, I mean, there are obviously everyone should buy Python in a nutshell.
Of course, of course.
But it's not necessarily the first Python book you would want. It has its adherents.
Mm.
But yeah, it's really I think don't get too lost in books. I mean, if you find a book that helps you, by all means use it, but don't overlook the fact that there's a huge amount of code on the internet that actually does stuff. You can download it and get it to do stuff and understand it that way. And if you want, kind of poke around inside it, modify it. I mean, what you download a copy of an open source repository and break it, what's going to happen? Delete it all and download a new one. So there's lots of room for experiment. And I think probably for every line of code you write, aim to read 100.
Yeah. Reading other people's code, right?
When you're learning, there's no better way to enhance your skill set than by seeing how other people do it. Particularly valuable is seeing how two different programmers have approached the same
problem.
Just one way to solve a problem. And the more broadly you read, the wider a selection of techniques you become aware of. And therefore, the more easily you can solve a broader range of problems, I suppose. So I would say that reading documentation, reading books, but I mean, in my case, I guess, when I was active in my career, when I was like working 8 hours a day and had a life and a family as well, I would read the technical book in bed at night. That was my bedtime reading. Read the technical books at night. During the day, I would read documentation when I needed to learn how to do specific things with the language or the operating. But nowadays, of course, I mean, when in my day I was dealing with big fat paper manuals that you had to read your way through.
Yeah.
Okay, they've got it easy.
Yeah.
we have to remember, of course, that there are still many people in the world who have no access to internet technology. What we have to remember that those people should not be excluded as we design our wonderful future universe.
Exactly. That's
some of them, empty or garbage and useful stuff like that.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Like accessibility to everyone who wants to like get into this. And I think in the future, more and more jobs and applications and devices will be dependent on having some certain technical skills and getting to, like, if you know a little bit of programming, that's what I try to tell people. If you know, it doesn't hurt. But again,
I would like to think that most sensible devices would be designed so that people with no programming skill at all could use them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, programming is becoming so ubiquitous that a lot of them are going to start developing these micro USB sockets, or become the old Bluetooth connections, or whatever.
Yes, exactly.
Of course, there are some horrendous security issues with these things as well.
Yep.
So it's important to learn enough about technology to know that you're not exposing yourself to people who aren't necessarily good actors in the process.
Exactly. That's also what was my point with, like, learning a little bit about something that so that you know that your like credential stuff is not stolen, or how you can make your just like securing a bank account, actually physical bank account. It's same with your data.
I mean, maybe if people were taught at school how digital certificates worked to encrypt communications traffic, we wouldn't now have a Home Secretary in the UK who thinks that all encryption systems should have backdoors in them for the government to break in and read what's being said.
Exactly.
Like, okay, so if you don't want that kind of encryption used, then perhaps we'd better all stop using credit cards on the internet. And you sigh. I mean, it's like, you can't uninvent technology. Encryption is out there.
Yeah.
And people are going to use it. Okay, so you make encryption illegal. Well, actually, criminals aren't widely known for their respective laws. So that's necessarily going to stop them using the technology. So
exactly.
To the massive people who would, doubtless wish to keep details of their own activities private and secure, as they've every right to expect. So, yeah, I mean, that kind of is going to become a lot more. And that, I mean, move on to another aspect of programming and technology, which is the ethical aspect.
Yes.
Should we technology specific? But maybe that's a conversation for another time.
Yeah, why not? Good one. So what I think we have a room for a couple of more questions. Is that okay with you, Steve?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, good. So like, when I myself wanted to get into programming, I sometimes did not know how to ask questions on forums and how to structure the question. So I was searching a lot at my start of my program, when I started to get into programming, like if I could be coached by someone. And it's not very it's not very typical to get a coaching in programming. And what would you suggest if somebody finds someone who can be their mentor? What should they look for in a mentor and in a coach?
Well, I don't know. I suppose patience is a necessary virtue. Because basically, if you undertake, if you undertake to mentor someone, it's more or less accepted that they are in some ways the junior. They're the person who's looking for, they're the supplicant, if you like, in the terms that we were using before. But yeah, somebody patient, someone who wants to help, or not someone who's maybe trying to build up a mentoring business or something like that. Again, when I was a kid and I started becoming interested in electronics, I went to the local amateur radio club, and there was a bunch of people there. Some of them, I think I was the youngest for a while, but some of them a couple of years older than me, some of them 10 years older than me, some of them, like my age now, so therefore probably 40 or 50 years older than me. But they were all joined by a common interest in something, and they wished to share the joys, the benefits that they'd had from that common interest during their lifetime. So, look for someone probably who's got a significant amount of experience and who is comfortably enough situated that they're not necessarily, struggling to survive on a daily level. Someone who's a bit established in their profession or whatever, and also think about, well, who could they introduce me to? Do they know people who've got specialisms in areas I want to investigate? Do they need someone with knowledge of linear algebra, algorithms?
Exactly.
Fitting or whatever techniques you want to use.
Yes.
Someone who's got interests in the same area as you. So that they will be sympathetic towards your enthusiasm, I suppose.
Yeah. It's good. It's a good angle to find someone. If you want to be mentored by someone, like does he have a network, and what has he patience? Has he experience, long experience, and maturity, of course, to be a mentor? So how many have you mentored? Have you had any apprentices?
I've never had any. Well, I've never had any formal apprentices. When I was in the States, I did employ one guy who, a young student who remotely did some system administration work for me. But I mean, when I was in Portland, I opened a little office, and I had 3 juniors in there who were learning to program and helping me to run a little business I was trying to get together there. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, mentoring is a part of management. The people I work with generally want to develop their technical skills. And so, typically, the education that you get is part of the reward. I don't know. I suppose it's the extra I can offer over the regular benefits that an employer might offer.
Exactly. I mean, that's what I think. Like mentoring could bring you a new one who want to learn programming, like mentoring. What the courses or the books doesn't give you, because you have this one-to-one connection. But I also think the mentor also expect you to work a lot alone, not just not interrupting the coach or the mentor all the time. I think being a developer is being well self-sufficient on your own learning path, right?
I mean, a mentoring relationship would be probably the kind of thing I had with I was lucky when I went to when I went to university. The university had a tutoring system. So there was one of the teaching staff that I would go and see once a week for an hour with 2 or 3 other students.
Exactly.
And we, talk about the problems that we were having, whether they were in, their subject or in some other, and they'd maybe suggest we read something, or possibly that we consulted another member of staff who had experience in that area, that kind of thing. So they'd sort of reach out their tendrils and use their knowledge on our behalf to connect us with the information and the help that we needed. And that's a good thing to do.
Exactly.
It doesn't take a huge amount of.
No.
I would like to encourage is everyone to be interested in the professional development of all their colleagues.
Yeah, exactly. Contribution. Wonderful. So, like lately, web development has become.
Maybe of your list. I don't know. Was it long then?
Pardon? Well, yeah, I think the topic that I get a lot of question about is web development and how well Python is suited for web development, like compared to JavaScript, which is the hot talk on web development stuff. So, what's your take on that? Because Python has Flask and Django. How would you compare those frameworks?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it has Flask and Django and Falcon and Turbo Gears and Pyramid, and yeah, I mean, there are an almost endless list of web technologies that have been developed using Python.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, anyway, speaking of books earlier, do not buy Python web programming. It is a 15-year-old, it's a 15-year-old book based on two books too. Wouldn't be terribly relevant for today. But one of the goals I had in writing that book
Mm-hmm.
was to cover the range of technologies that you need to understand in order to put web systems together. So I
Mm-hmm.
started out by covering, the basic Python programming technologies.
Mm-hmm.
I also covered networking, explaining how the and in fact one of the additions to the nutshell Python in a nutshell that I'm happiest about is that we do now have
Mm-hmm.
a brief explanation
Mm-hmm.
of how networking works in Python.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I did some networking. Obviously, a lot of the information that web systems was stored in databases, and so I explained how to use database technology. That's probably the least successful part of the book, I suspect. I
Mm-hmm.
created something that no other person would probably ever want to use, but it was just it was an interesting demonstration of how Python could be used to do
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
it wasn't necessarily the optimum implementation. And then obviously the technologies of the web, so an understanding of HTML.
Mm.
And again, it shows you how old the book is. A lot of the code has HTML snippets
Mm.
as string literals inside the code.
Mm.
Obviously, isn't at all practice, but I was more interested in demonstrating that things could be done
Mm.
than trying to second guess whatever technology was going to win out.
Mm.
So yeah, HTML, the got the HTTP protocol basically,
Mm.
and once you know that, you've got an insight into how any web system you like is put together. And as time has gone by, obviously there have been wrinkles, like people have introduced NoSQL databases,
Yeah.
document stores, all that kind of thing.
Mm.
That's
Mm.
been improved in various technologies. But once you know the fundamentals, you can make sense of it all.
Exactly. I remember taking one course which was Python for web programming or web programming with Python through Eduonix, a learning academy. What was Were you the author of that course? No, no, maybe it was somebody
Um,
else.
I don't think that was my class. No,
No, no.
Python for the web, was it? Did you say?
Yeah, Python for web programming with Python. It was the course was called yeah, Python for web programming. I think it was a course on Udemy that I it was a course on Udemy that I took, but just that
Not written a
no,
Udemy
okay,
class.
okay. Then okay, but okay, now we have covered the path to web development, and you said like getting Python, the back end stuff with Flask and Django, and then HTML and CSS stuff for the front end, and also databases is a very
Yeah.
important part, and the server side of things to learn. Yeah. So I think we have just
Oh, and but you also mentioned JavaScript. I should
yeah.
confess. So it's not really a confession, but I'm well known to be a, a Python user. I think it's altered my biography on the Python wiki.
Uh-huh.
to say something like, old fart Python bigot or something like that, implying that,
Oh.
well, the implication was, I would support Python against cheese even when you were asking what went best on biscuits
Mm-hmm.
or something like that. But just for the record, there are web systems built in JavaScript, which you mentioned,
Mm-hmm.
and we have recently deployed our first node-based system, so we are in the JavaScript world.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing about the JavaScript world is that the contributions are much more fragmented
Mm-hmm.
than they are in the Python world. In the Python world, a library is something significant,
Mm-hmm.
where JavaScript people feel free to almost to contribute, a function to add one to a number, if you like.
Ah.
So things are much more fragmented over in the JavaScript world, but there's a lot of good stuff there, and
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to ignore it just because it's
Yeah. Good, good. So I think we are on the last question here, Steve. What would you recommend if somebody asks you, like, I want to get into program, but I know the basics, but which field should I get into now that I'm learning Python? So what would you recommend? Which field?
Wow. Well, I don't know. I mean, I suppose I would say don't necessarily expect to work in one field for all of your career,
Mm-hmm.
because what's popular now
Mm-hmm.
won't be popular in 10 years. It'll just be a layer upon which other more interesting things are being built. So
Yeah.
I would say try to get involved with something that engages whatever other interests you have in life. So, I mean, I'm very lucky. I recently became the CTO of this stress management and resilience company
Yeah.
that you mentioned.
Yeah.
I'm interested in how we can help people to relieve their stresses and manage their lives to be happier
Mm.
and more effective. So it's a great job. But
Okay.
at the same time, when I think about my long programming career, I've written accounting systems, I've written interrupt handlers in communications multiplexers. I've done all kinds of things. So it's a question of finding things that interest you
Mm.
and work in that area. Don't I mean, programming is just a skill.
Mm. Yeah.
The interesting thing, as with all technologies, is the application
Exactly.
to which it's put. So, if you hate the entertainment industry, then don't go into, the web houses that write websites for films.
Yeah.
Do music videos and that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
If you're more interested in electronics, then
Yeah.
look for an electronics supplier and maybe build their website instead.
Exactly.
But, I mean, the web technology is so pervasive that's relative. It's much more easy to do now than it would have been in 15 years ago.
No, I like that answer a lot, because trying to find the crossroad of like the technology and what you're interested in. I mean, ultimately that is what technology is going to help us and help humanity with, like being at the cross point of where humanity meets technology. And hopefully AI machine learning stuff there, it will help us and not destroy us. So what was the name of the
Yeah, it's almost basically like the
no,
name
please.
of the what? Sorry.
No, please, just finish your answer first.
I can't remember what I was going to say.
Oh,
It was just an off-the-cuff remark. It was nothing of any great significance.
oh, okay. Sorry about cutting you off, but the name
No,
of
don't worry.
the name of the company that you are working with now and your stress management. Could you tell us a little bit more about that? What specifically are your company focusing on when it comes to stress management?
Okay, well, I wish I had in front of me the flyer that crossed my desk today, because we're just getting ready for our very first recruitment fair. We're going to be at Silicon Milk Roundabout on Sunday.
Okay.
But yeah, okay, the company is called Global Stress Index Limited, and we're working on a product called Felix that takes data from biometric devices. In this
Uh-huh.
case, I'm showing you the wrist-worn one that I'm using, which is a little Vivo Smart device that
Mm-hmm.
uses Bluetooth to submit data to the phone,
Uh,
and then the phone analyzes your biometrics
mm-hmm.
and maintains various pieces of information
Mm.
which relate to how stressed you are, which we summarize in such a way that you can get an idea of how balanced your day has been, how much time you spent relaxed, how much time you spent, engaged and on with the world, and how much
Mm.
time you've had sleep.
Mm.
And so obviously, we can show you a perfect day where you've had 8 hours of each, or you might discover one day, you've only had 5 hours sleep because you're up partying, so your alarm
Mm.
is so,
uh,
and that sort of stuff. But the thing about stress is it's not inherently bad,
mm-hmm.
as long as the natural recovery process
Mm-hmm.
is allowed to complete. But if before recovery is complete you are subjected to further stress,
Mm-hmm.
then ultimately your ability to recover from stress, your resilience itself actually declines. And that's the thing that can be harmful to your health and disruptive to your relationships
Mm.
and all that kind of stuff as
Right.
well. And we can all,
Okay.
you can imagine the classic picture of the sort of driven industrial executive who
Mm.
spends 18 hours a day at business and commutes between continents to oversee their affairs. I mean, those kinds of people subject themselves to, no matter how much they gossip themselves, they are
Mm.
subjecting themselves to equal
Mm.
levels of stress.
Mm.
So yeah, we anyway at all kinds of levels, we want to help people to know, um, what the stress is, stress picture is at the moment,
Mm. Mm.
and ultimately we're looking at helping them not only to monitor their resilience but also their readiness for various types of activity. Because
Exactly.
some of our customers, they are by nature of what they do going to be subjected to repeated stress, and so it
Mm.
becomes very important.
Mm.
Like if you're a sports person,
Mm.
whether you train on a particular day
Mm.
could be critical to your performance on the day, and they're all timing their performance to peak at the actual event, so they don't want to train in such a way that their performance is suboptimal when
Mm.
they get there. So there's a lot of interesting stuff. Some of them, interesting in human terms, some of them interesting in scientific terms. So
Yeah.
it's a good broad mix of activities to try and coordinate.
Oh wow. Sounds really
And
exciting
it's
and
called the product's called Felix.
Felix. Oh,
Hmm.
I'll find the link and I'll put it in the description so that people can check it out because it sounds very very interesting, like getting the data and how the data can improve a person's life. Of course, that's what we should use the data for, the enormous amount of data that is available. I mean, that kind of usage of data that's what helping humanity get better, right? So
Well,
fully support
we
that
can hope
project.
so. We can hope so. Your viewers should know that it's not likely to be available on a website near them anytime soon, unfortunately. I mean, you can go to felix.com, but our initial customer base is going to be coming from the corporate world
Mm.
and basically people who are interested in engaging for multiple users.
Okay.
We do have ambitions to have a public website, but there are no immediate plans.
Okay. But at least people can follow the development of that project. So we'll link
Oh,
it.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yes. I was talking with my team yesterday as well about having an engineering blog, which will let people know kind of what we're doing technically.
Mm.
Obviously, we can't talk about secret sauce, but
Mm.
we do a lot of interesting things that other people have to do as well. And if we can help them to do them slightly better,
Mm.
it just improves people's lot a little. It makes them think slightly better of us and helps them along in whatever they're trying to do.
Wonderful.
Community.
Yeah, great stuff. Wow, this has been such an honor to interview you, Steve. So, and humbly thank you so much for your time, that you took your time and came to this interview and shared your views and advice to the viewers. And definitely it will be a huge, like, not part of knowledge treasure, this one, because I mean, you have such great experience with being a developer, and you have showered us with your knowledge. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. Anything else you would like to say before departing?
I suppose the only other thing I can say is, if anyone does watch this interview and finds it helpful, then the thing I'd like them to do is to follow my example. And when you've accumulated enough experience to pass it on, try and pass it on. I mean, it's like money; you can't take it with you when you go. So
That's what I wanted to hear.
also, just a completely random, a completely random thing that I will throw out as at the end of the interview is there's a guy called Seth Godin,
Mm,
Sethgodin.
mm,
You may know him if you track the marketing world at all, but one
yes.
of his shticks is, is that he has, I can't remember the number, but he has an enormous amount of ideas
Mm,
in a typical day. So many that he couldn't even put one in 100 into practice.
hmm.
So, there is no need to regard ideas as your personal property.
Mm,
Share them.
yeah,
If you get an idea that you're never going to do anything with, share it. It might take root somewhere else, and it might
exactly.
provide a useful and rewarding occupation for somebody else.
Yeah. Great,
It's
great.
been great talking with you, Sir.
Thank you, and I hope to interview you again sometime later. So have a wonderful evening and talk to you next time. Thank you.
Well, if there isn't an outcry on the internet, we could consider doing it again.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.